Next, Broadway teaches the country to sing and dance during the Roaring '20s.
Broadway becomes the popularizer of the new, the modern.
The Charleston, jazz, and the new American slang. It's all on Broadway, the American musical. This is the Shubert Theater on 44th Street, the home of the famous producers who helped to make the 1920s the most prodigious decade in Broadway history. In the Jazz Age, New York was the syncopated city, and Broadway was the Big Apple, the goal of all ambition. You could see Al Jolson and the Marx Brothers on stage, and songwriters like the Gershwins and Rodgers and Hart created fascinating rhythms. Thanks to the power of the press and the arrival of radio and talking pictures, everyone in America could hear the seductive siren song of Broadway.
Goodbye. Don't cry. The little future train that takes me away from you. You don't know just how sad it makes me. Kiss me pretty and then out, do it over again. Watch for the mail, I'll never fail. If you don't get a letter, then you know I'm in jail. Hey, hey, don't cry, Tootsie, don't cry. Kiss me, Tootsie, goodbye.
Broadway in the '20s was a showcase for the sweeping changes that transformed American culture. New York was the mecca of the Jazz Age, and Broadway was its glamorous shrine, a place where fame was first manufactured.
Goodbye, Tootsie, goodbye.
The 20s are a time of incredibly rapid change, really quick modernization. And this is the decade in which Broadway and the musical theater are in many ways at the height of their influence.
A tremendously rich, exciting time in the theater. You know, in 1927, you have 250 shows opening, 50 of them musicals, and you have over 20 million people going to the theater, probably more than double what we have today.
From 1920 to 1929, you were really sitting on a rainbow. Everything was lovely.
A new era on Broadway began on January the 16th, 1919, when the sale of alcohol was outlawed in New York.
The night before Prohibition is enacted in New York, people do run wild. They run around with bottles and baby carriages. You know, they are buying every last bottle that they possibly can to store. They really think the supply of liquor is going to run out. What developed instead was that New York really led the nation in the carelessness of its enforcement of Prohibition.
We have 3,200 speakeasies on Broadway. 3,200 speakeasies between 42nd and 55th Street.
5'2", eyes of blue, but oh, what those 5 foot could do. Has anybody seen my girl? Turned up nose, turned down hole.
This is a very creative period for language. You had passwords at speakeasies. Classes were now mingling, and they were mingling with the underworld because everybody was breaking the law.
Upstairs, boy. Watch that elevator. Make it stop. You stay here. Stay right here.
A time when the rules and the language are being questioned and rewritten is going to be a golden age of musical comedy.
It's a time of liberated sensibilities, a feeling that life is full of youth and vigor, and the music of the 1920s, jazz, really calls the beat of a new age. And the songs that are coming out of Broadway really are registering this kind of shift in the American sensibility.
If it's naughty to rouge your lips, shake your shoulders and twist your hips. Let a lady confess, I wanna be bad. If it's naughty to vamp the men, sleep each morning till after 10, then the answer is yes, I wanna be bad. This thing of being a good little goody is all very well. What can you do if you're loaded with plenty of health and vigor? When you're learning the lips are for, if it's naughty to ask for more, let a lady confess, I wanna be bad.
New York theater, particularly musical comedy, is really about the pace of change. And nothing was changing as fast as the American woman. Look at what the woman was wearing in 1914 and what she's wearing in 1922. Her hair's gone, her skirts are short. Her hips have disappeared. Her back is in view. She's smoking, she's drinking. She's kind of trashed the past en route to the party at the Speakeasy. And what would attract theater and musical comedy more than something changing that fast?
While American women were enjoying new freedoms, the heroines of Broadway were coming into their own good fortune. Audiences fell in love with Cinderella stories, musical comedies in which the main character might be a dishwasher in Act 1, but marry the man of her dreams just before the final curtain.
Many of the musicals were about women. There was a show called Mary, there was a show called Irene, there was a show called Sally. And then someone said, let's do a show called Sally, Irene, and Mary. And there was a musical with that title. You had to have a girl's name or some reference to a girl in the show.
She was almost always Irish, a good-hearted poor orphan who used slangy banter to win the hand of her millionaire suitor. The living embodiment of the jazz age Cinderella was a petite blonde beauty who looked sweet but could dance hot. Marilyn Miller.
Marilyn Miller could combine innocence with savvy. She could convey that feel of the big city, the sparkle of the star. She could be both sophisticated and a kind of rural archetype of the farm girl.
Born in Evansville, Indiana in 1898, Miller was raised in showbiz, billed as Mademoiselle Sugarlump in her parents' vaudeville act. As a teenager, she danced in the Schubert's Passing Show revues. And in 1918, she made it to the top when Ziegfeld featured her in his legendary Follies.
She does her hair all wrong. She isn't costumed properly. She has a sweet voice, but not much of it. And I've seen better dancing. But a delightful thing happens when she comes on stage. Billy Burke Ziegfeld.
In 1920, Florence Ziegfeld showcased his all-American Cinderella in a new show with music by Jerome Kern. By the time the curtain fell on Sally, their spunky heroine had become a Follies star, just as Marilyn Miller had in real life.
Every star on Broadway is a testament to pluck and luck and achievement and all the values that come with the package of the American dream.
Just think, tomorrow night I'm going to get a chance to dance in front of a real audience.
Our culture is a culture of optimism, and what the musical sells is optimism.
Sure, I'm glad.
Your dreams came true on Broadway. You go to a Broadway show and your dreams came true. You go back to Williamsburg or Brownsville or the Bronx and your dreams don't come true.
A heart full of joy and gladness will always fight sadness and strife. So is the heart in silver lining and try to find the sunny side of the line. Better. Don't you feel better?
Sally captured the willful optimism of the age. And Marilyn Miller became living proof that Broadway could turn a dancing Cinderella from Indiana into a national star. The 20s on Broadway was an age of wonderful nonsense. Audiences wanted to have a good time, and musical comedy did not rely on memorable stories. For 50 cents, you could get a ticket to see the zany antics of the Marx Brothers live.
Did someone call me Schnorrer?
Hooray, hooray, hooray! He went into the jungles where all the monkeys throw nuts.
If I stay here, I'll go nuts.
Hooray, hooray, hooray!
Say, don't you see there are ladies present? What do you think this is? Put that hat down, will you?
Hey, what do you do there? Get out of here.
The idea of a musical was you have a funny story or a silly story or a star vehicle, something that shows off your stars, and you have a comedy scene, and then you have a song and or a dance number.
The quintessential show of the 1920s was the revue. The musical revues of that period were a representation of the pluralism of American life. They captured a little bit of everything.
They were not musicals the way we think of them today, where there's a story and actors playing characters. They were loosely structured revues that featured songs and also the stars.
It's really disgusting.
Oh, it's terrible.
I'm sorry that you had to see this.
That's all right.
Now, stand clear and keep your eye on the ball.
Most of the shows were almost entirely frivolous little stories. A woman named Maud, and a man named Claude. And then you'd never hear from them again in the next skit, because the next skit, Bert Lahr was in.
Well, what about it? What about it?
That's what you call 2 in 1. 2 in 1. It's a suit and an overcoat combined. You like a suit like this?
I like a blue serge with a white stripe.
With a white... Oh, with a stripe. With a stripe. Say what you want. There you...
Wait a minute. You're trespassing.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, rockabye, your rockabye baby, with a Dixie melody. Mammy mine, your little rolling stone that rolled away. Mammy mine, your little rolling stone is home today. Better stay just to see your smiling face.
The biggest star of the Prohibition era was Al Jolson, a Jewish immigrant from Eastern Europe who began his career in minstrel shows.
Mammy mine.
He was the self-proclaimed world's greatest entertainer, and his blackface Mammy songs brought audiences to tears.
When you croon a little tune from the heart of Dixie. Hang that cradle, mammy mine, right on that Mason-Dixon line.
Here's this Lithuanian Jew from the shtetl singing about my homeland in Dixie and my lost mother. The homeland was a homeland of the mind, a place where my sadness would be healed. And he never would have done that in his own persona, but hiding behind the black mask, he could go there, and audiences were intensely moved.
Rock-a-bye, your rock-a-bye, baby, to a Dixie melody.
The Broadway musical came from a very, very complicated place. Even if the end product seems to be one of joy and optimism and the human spirit soaring, their birth started in dark, really peculiar, really interesting places.
It's very hard for us to understand blackface today as an institution. It seems so incredibly racist and demeaning and stereotypical. But I think there's another side to it that Jolson represents. For Jolson, I think blackface was never about belittling dark-skinned people. It was about liberating himself. Putting on blackface helped him express a depth, a vulnerability. And that's where his star power came from.
Give me what I cry for. You know you got friend kisses that I die for. You know you made me love you. You made me love you. I didn't think to do it. I didn't think to do it. You made me want you. All the time you knew it. Just all the time you knew it. You made me happy sometimes.
Jolson was a really crazy, neurotic man. He was very defensive and very difficult in that kind of prima donna way.
He'd become a star, and he defined what it meant to be a star, to act like a star, in such a way that there wasn't much room for anybody else up there but Al.
Al Jolson used to have to turn the faucets on in the sink when other people in his show were getting applause. That's insecurity.
Jolson stopped a show that he was in that wasn't going well and said, "Folks, I can tell you how this ends. How about if I just come out and sing my songs?" And you either took Jolson on his terms or you didn't take him at all.
California, here I come, right back where I started from, where bowers of flowers bloom in the spring.
I was never a great Jolson fan. I always thought he overacted and overplayed, but the audience was not in agreement with my opinion.
Open up that Golden Gate, California, here I come.
The proudest day of my life was when Shuffle Along opened. At the intermission, all these white people kept saying, "I would like to touch him, the man who wrote the music." At last, I'm a human being. U.B. Blake.
The invention or the creation of jazz by black artists sort of gave this country a language that it was searching for and gave it a rhythmic identity. And so it makes perfect sense that the composers would use this invented language and rhythm for the theater.
A jazz show like no other arrived on Broadway on May 23, 1921. Produced on a shoestring with borrowed costumes and second-hand sets, Shuffle Along featured a rich, rousing score by Noble Sissle and U.B. Blake.
Ladies and gentlemen, years ago I wrote a tune called I'm Just Wild About Harry. I'll play it for you. I'm just wild about Harry. Harry's wild about me. I don't know the words, so I'll play the melody.
James Hubert Blake was born in 1883 and raised in Baltimore by a devoutly religious mother and a hard-drinking father. As a youngster, Hubie first syncopated church hymns on an organ, and at 15 he had a regular job as a pianist in a bawdy house. After World War I, he and vocalist Noble Sissle developed a vaudeville act called the Dixie Duo. When Sissle and Blake joined forces with another vaudeville team, Miller and Lyles, Shuffle Along was born.
Great comedic talent, great songwriting, and they're introducing a kind of romantic quality about black performers that had never before been seen on stage. Forget being seen, hadn't been allowed. There's a ballad that's introduced in the show, Love Will Find a Way.
Love will find a way.
Love will find a way.
First time was a love song in a Negro show.
And that the song that they said that they couldn't afford to have in a Negro show because the Negroes didn't have romance?
Romance, yeah.
I remember that very well.
Yeah.
Oh,
Play
yeah.
the chorus.
Oh,
I don't know the verse now.
Well, that's all right.
Just
Sing the chorus
verse.
and I'll try to help you. Here? Oh, good.
Love will find a way.
Oh, I know it will, honey.
Though the skies are gray, love like ours.
This was profoundly risky, but it paid off. The song was a hit, and the precedent was set.
With Shuffle Along, and was still unquestionably a certain amount of minstrelsy still going on, but because it was created by black artists and performed by black artists, you saw the real juice, you saw the real spark. Not black performers performing white people's vision of black people. It must have been just an exhilarating thing.
Shuffle Along cracked open Broadway's doors to black talent. And for the first time, the orchestra seating in a Broadway theater included a section reserved for Negro patrons.
It is when the chorus and principals get going in the dances that the world seems a brighter place to live.